Hey, this is Mr. Mitchell. We're going to have a video on the respiratory system and the excretory system. Go ahead and write down the questions and let's respirate. Oh, bad joke. Well, anyway, here's the respiratory system. The oxygen your body needs comes from the atmosphere. You knew that. But the body doesn't use most of the gases that we breathe in. Have a chart right here, a pie chart right here of the gases that are in the air. Now, you've probably studied this at some point, maybe even in my class. But you see, with nitrogen is like 78% of the air. So when you breathe in, 78% of what you breathe in is going to be nitrogen. But the lungs end up just shooting that back out whenever you exhale. Of course, what it needs is going to be the oxygen. But it actually doesn't take 100% of the oxygen in that air that you breathe in. You inhale, 21% of that is going to be oxygen. You actually end up exhaling about 16% oxygen of the exhale. So you do use some of the oxygen that you are inhaling, but it's not 100% of it. If the air only had 5 or 6% oxygen, we'd probably be all right and be able to use all that. Of course, that'd probably leave quite an imbalance of oxygen in the air. But anyway, that's for another time. Anyway, you notice there is other. Now, some of that other is going to be carbon dioxide, but it's not that much. Argon is actually ahead of carbon dioxide in what's in the air now. But whenever you exhale, you're actually going to have about 4% carbon dioxide. Pardon me. So you end up increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the air substantially. And 4% is not that much, but it's a lot more than it was. Now, the numbers don't add up. We took away 5 oxygen and added 4 carbon dioxide. The other will end up bumping up to 2% just because there are other gases that you end up with in your bloodstream that come out. Well, anyway, that's what happens as far as whenever you breathe in and the percentage of whatever comes out. So, the chemical reaction here, once it goes into your lungs, is called respiration. And respiration is a little more complicated than substituting respiration for breathing. Respiration is going to be far more than just breathing. Of course, it starts with breathing, getting the stuff in your lungs, but you do have chemical reactions inside the cells of your body that involve oxygen and that breath that you took in. Respiration is going to produce carbon dioxide and water, and when you exhale, you will exhale that carbon dioxide, and you're going to exhale all that nitrogen, all 78%, and like I said, 16% of it oxygen, and you will have a little bit of water, and that little bit of water will end up being a little bit of that 2% right there. But if you notice, whenever you breathe in very cold air, you're going to have that vapor there. So you do get a little bit of water out whenever you exhale. Whenever you breathe on a window pane, you have that fog that shows up there. Respiration needs help from the digestive system. The digestive system, when you eat something down here in your stomach, it is going to bring in the glucose from what you eat. That's sugars. And the cardiovascular system, the blood circulatory system is also called, is going to distribute the oxygen to the cell. So it's got to have that glucose and it's got to have that oxygen for the respiration system. So they kind of work in tandem, I guess you might say. Incoming air passes through the nose into the pharynx, which you see right here, into the trachea, and into the bronchi, which whenever you have it singular, it's called bronchus. We're not going to have anything on the larynx. And you've already learned about the epiglottis. So Air comes in and goes down through here, and the bronchial tubes are going to be these tubes right here. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the notes. Okay, back to the naval cavity. There's going to be mucus in the naval cavity. The mucus in the naval cavity is going to help trap dust. And mucus is not just going to be in the naval cavity. You will find that the mucus is also going to be a little bit in the pharynx and a lot in the trachea. So it kind of all along helps to trap the dust particles. Air is then going to go to your pharynx, which is another word for throat. Pharynx, throat. The air then goes to the trachea, which is called the windpipe. The windpipe is the trachea. It's also mucus filled, like I mentioned before. Air then moves to the bronchi. You know, that's bronchi is plural, bronchus is singular. And that passes directly into the lungs. The bronchial tubes pass directly into the lungs, and inside the lungs, these tubes are going to divide into smaller and smaller tubes, and it's going to end up looking a little bit like a tree. Like the bronchial tube is the trunk of the tree, and you have all kinds of little bitty things that end up sprouting at the very ends, and it comes from just the trunk. So it's going to kind of look a little bit like a tree here. Now let me go to the next slide. And you can see that in here, this picture right here has kind of that tree look to it. And it's going to go all the way out to the end of the lungs to the alveoli. The alveoli are the smallest of the tubes, and they actually look a little bit like grapes. Each alveolus, which is the singular, is surrounded by capillaries, and I have that right here. You may remember what capillaries do. They're the itty-bitty smallest of the blood vessels. Here is where the exchange of air is. You have in the lungs, you have breathed in that oxygen into the lungs, and the other gases, it goes in here. These capillaries are going to take that oxygen, and they're going to give back the carbon dioxide. So this is where the transaction takes place, at the alveoli with all the capillaries there. Here's that exchange. And we have in our bodies, our book is going to say, about 300 million alveoli. On an average day, you're going to breathe more than 20,000 times. There is a muscle here called a diaphragm, which is right under your lungs, which is very essential toward your actual breathing. The rib muscles and the diaphragm contract, and that forces exhaling. And when they expand, that kind of starts the inhaling process. So without those muscles around the lungs, I don't think the breathing would happen. Oh, here's another example here. You take the CO2, which is carbon dioxide, out of the blood, and the alveoli puts the oxygen in. So that carries us over to the excretory system, kind of having two complete different systems here. Respiratory, and since we have the time on the video, we're going to go to excretory. Different organs in the body have roles for removing waste. This removal process is known as excretion, removal of waste. Two wastes your body must eliminate are excess water and something called urea. Now, you may not have heard of urea before. Urea is a chemical that comes from the breakdown of proteins, which you have all over your digestive system. I believe would be the best place to analyze that. Your two kidneys are the major organs in the excretory system. And you can see where the kidneys are right here. They act as big filters. And each kidney contains about 1 million nephrons. Now you know these nephrons are very, very small just because you have about 1,000,000 of them in your kidney. These nephrons are tiny filters that remove waste and produce urine. The nephrons remove waste and produce urine. So, what happens with the urine there? Blood, well, I guess we'll go back to the beginning. The blood enters your kidneys. And I guess it's not from here, it's over from here. You see the kidneys are pretty close to the heart. So this blood that comes back, that is represented by this blue, is going to come into your kidneys to drop off some of that waste. Urea, water, and urea and water move out of the blood and into a tube called a ureter. And you can see this yellow tube that travels a pretty good distance. It travels from your heart area to around your waist area. Now, as the liquid passes through the ureter, it can be reabsorbed by the body. There are capillaries that surround this ureter. For example, on a hot day, the blood and your cells just may need all the water it can get. So that's an example where some of this substance that's going down through here will actually go back out into the body. You may have noticed on a day where it's very, very hot, you may not have much urine if you're outside and needing as much water as you can get in your body. Well, anyway, what does make it through the ureter goes into the bladder. Now, the bladder is where bladder stores urine. The bladder stores urine. And when urine does leave the body, it goes through a small tube called the urethra. The urethra. Now, the kidney system down through the ureter into the bladder and down through the urethra is not the only way you can get rid of waste. You may remember that just by sweating, you get rid of some waste. In sweat, you get rid of some excess water, and urea comes out in your sweat. And when you exhale, you get rid of that carbon dioxide that is in your body, and you don't need that in it. Hey, I hope you've learned a little bit about the respiratory and the excretory system.